I stood there in the kitchen, my hands gripping the edge of the counter so tight my knuckles turned white, while Jillian sat at the table, calm as ever, sipping her tea like nothing was wrong. She didn't even look up when she said it, just dropped the bomb like it was nothing. By the way, Camille's wedding is family only. She thinks it'll be less awkward if you don't attend. My stomach twisted, and I felt the air get sucked out of the room. Less awkward? For who? I'd been there for every single moment of that girl's life. Every scraped knee, every late-night fever when I sat by her bed with a cold cloth, every ballet class I paid for even when money was tight, every breakup I talked her through when she thought the world was ending. And now, my own daughter's wedding, the day I'd dreamed about since she was little, the day I'd pictured myself walking her down the aisle, and I wasn't even on the list. "I'm her father," I said, my voice coming out low and shaky, like I was trying to convince myself it was still true. Jillian just shrugged, her eyes still on her tea. "You're overreacting. It's just a wedding. Just a wedding. My daughter's wedding." The words hit me like a punch, and I wanted to yell, to flip the table, to make her feel how deep that cut me. But I didn't. I swallowed it down, like I always do, and stared at her, waiting for something, anything, that showed she cared. Nothing came. She took another sip, and that was it. I turned away, my chest tight, and walked to the living room. My laptop was sitting there on the couch, and before I knew it, I was typing. Santorini. A week-long trip. Far away from this house, from Jillian's shrugs, from the sting of being erased by my own kid. I didn't tell Jillian what I was doing. She didn't deserve to know. I just booked the flight, the villa, the whole thing, my fingers moving fast like I was racing to get out before I broke down. When it was done, I leaned back and let out a long breath. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg to be included. If they didn't want me there, fine. I'd go where I could breathe again. The next morning, I packed a bag, nothing fancy, just some shirts, shorts, my old sandals, and left a note on the counter. Gone for a week. Don't call unless it's an emergency. I didn't even look back when I shut the door. The drive to the airport felt like shedding a weight I'd been carrying for years. I kept replaying Jillian's words in my head, less awkward, and every time, it made my jaw clench. How could it be awkward to have me there? I'd raised Camille. I'd been the one who stayed up all night building that dollhouse she wanted for Christmas when she was 6, the one who drove her to every recital, the one who told her she was enough when some jerk broke her heart in high school. And now what? I was the outsider. By the time I boarded the plane, I was done thinking about it. The hum of the engines drowned out the noise in my head, and I stared out the window as the ground fell away. Santorini was waiting, blue water, white houses, a place where I could be something other than the guy who wasn't good enough for his own family. I didn't know what I'd find there, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let them ruin me. Not Jillian, not Camille, not anyone. I'd spent too long being the one who held it all together while they took me for granted. As the plane climbed higher, I felt something shift inside me. Not peace, not yet, but a spark of something new. I wasn't on their list, but I was still here. And I was going to figure out what that meant, one day at a time, starting with that first step off the plane into a world that didn't know how bad I was hurting. I stepped out of the taxi and onto the stone path leading to my villa, the warm Santorini sun hitting my face as the driver hauled my bag behind me. The Aegean Sea stretched out below, sparkling like it was showing off just for me, and the whitewashed walls of the cliffside glowed against the blue sky. I could smell the salt in the air, mixed with something sweet, maybe flowers, maybe just freedom. The guy at the check-in desk handed me a key and a glass of champagne, smiling like he knew I needed it. I took it, nodded, and walked to my room, pushing open the door to a view that stopped me cold. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the ocean, and a little balcony hung right over the edge of the cliff. I dropped my bag and stepped outside, the breeze tugging at my shirt. Back home, Camille was probably fussing over centerpieces, those fancy ones Jillian kept texting her about, the ones I'd overheard them planning months ago when I was still part of their world. Jillian was likely posing for selfies at the bridal shower, flashing that smile she'd perfected over years of making everything about her. And me? I was here, 1,000 miles away, with nothing but the sound of waves and the cold fizz of champagne in my hand. I kicked off my shoes, propped my feet up on the balcony railing, and stared out at the water. It was quiet, quieter than my life had been in years. No arguments, no demands, No one asking me to fix something or pay for something or just shut up and take it. I pulled out my phone, snapped a picture of my bare feet against the endless blue, and posted it online with a caption, "Silence looks good on me." I didn't think much of it. Just a little jab, maybe, or just a way to mark the moment. Within minutes, my cousin Theo popped up in the comments with a string of laughing emojis and a "living your best life, huh?" My sister Rosa messaged me almost right away. "Wait, weren't you supposed to be at the wedding?" I didn't answer her. Not yet. I wasn't ready to explain how I'd been cut out, how my own daughter decided I didn't belong at the biggest day of her life. Jillian and Camille? Nothing from them. No texts, no calls, no likes on the photo. I waited a bit, sipping my drink, watching the screen, half expecting something, "Where are you?" or even a "Hope you're okay." But the silence from them was louder than the sea. I set the phone down and leaned back in the chair, letting the sun warm my face. Good. Let them keep their silence. I didn't need it. I waved at a waiter passing by and ordered another drink, something stronger this time, a whiskey on the rocks. The ice clinked in the glass when he brought it, and I took a slow sip, feeling the burn slide down my throat. The villa was small but perfect. White walls, a bed with crisp sheets, a little table where I could sit and watch the world go by. I didn't have a plan for the week, and that was the best part. No schedules, no obligations, just me and this place. I thought about home for a second, about the house I'd left behind, the kitchen where Jillian had dropped that news like it was nothing, the empty spot where I used to park my car. Then I pushed it out of my head. They were busy with their wedding, their drama, their life that didn't include me. Fine, I'd make my own. The sun started dipping lower, painting the sky orange and pink, and I sat there, glass in hand, watching it sink into the water. My phone buzzed again, Theo, probably, or Rosa checking in. I ignored it. This was my time, my view, my peace. I wasn't going to let anyone pull me back into the mess I'd escaped. The whiskey was smooth, the breeze was cool, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to be anything for anybody. I finished the drink, set the glass down, and leaned my head back, closing my eyes. The sound of the waves rolled in, steady and slow, and I let it carry me away. Whatever they were doing back home, it didn't matter. The view was better from here, and I was going to soak in every second of it. I was 3 days into my Santorini escape, sprawled out on a cushioned lounger by the villa's infinity pool, when the peace I'd built started to crack. The sun was high, the sky clear, and I just settled in with a cold beer, the condensation dripping onto my hand as I watched the water shimmer below. Everything was perfect, the kind of quiet I hadn't felt in years, the kind that let me breathe without someone needing something from me. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced at it, expecting maybe a text from Rosa or another dumb joke from Theo. It was Theo, all right, but the message wasn't funny. "Call me ASAP. You're not gonna believe this." My stomach tightened a little, but I brushed it off. Whatever it was, it could wait. I took a sip of my beer and leaned back, closing my eyes against the glare. Then it buzzed again, 3 missed calls from Jillian, one after another, lighting up the screen like a warning. Before I could even process that, Camille's name popped up with a call. I let it ring out, watching the seconds tick by until it stopped. Then Jillian again, twice more. My phone was turning into a war zone, and I just sat there, staring at it, the beer suddenly tasting flat in my mouth. What the hell was going on? I didn't want to know, not yet. Not when I'd finally found a corner of the world that didn't feel like it was crushing me. I muted the thing, flipped it face down on the table, and rolled over on the lounger, trying to get back to that calm I'd had 5 minutes ago. The pool water lapped gently against the edge, and I focused on that, on the breeze brushing my skin, on the distant hum of a boat somewhere out at sea. But my mind wouldn't settle. Why were they calling now? After days of nothing, no texts, no, "Hey, where'd you go?" Suddenly, they couldn't stop blowing up my phone. I picked it up again, just to check, and saw the notifications piling up, voicemails from Jillian, a text from Camille that just said, "Dad," with a question mark, even a missed call from my brother-in-law Colin, who never calls unless he's drunk or in trouble. It was like they'd all remembered I existed at the exact same moment, and I didn't know if I should feel angry or smug or just tired. I set the phone back down, harder this time, and grabbed my beer, finishing it in one long gulp. If I wasn't important enough to be at Camille's wedding, why should they be important enough to ruin my day? I'd spent years being the guy who picked up the phone, who dropped everything to fix their messes, Jillian's fights, Camille's crises, Colin's dumb decisions. Not this time. I waved at the waiter walking by and ordered another beer, my voice steady even though my chest felt tight. He brought it quick, and I cracked it open, the hiss cutting through the quiet. I took a sip and stared out at the horizon, trying to push the buzzing out of my head. They'd made their choice when they left me off that list. Jillian with her shrugs, Camille with her silence. They didn't get to decide now that I mattered. I pictured them back home, probably scrambling after something went wrong, thinking good old dad would swoop in like always. Maybe the flowers didn't show up, or the cake was late, or someone said something stupid at the rehearsal dinner. Whatever it wasn't my problem. I leaned back, the sun warming my face, and let my mind wander to simpler things, the taste of the beer, the way the water looked like glass, the fact that I didn't have to be anywhere or do anything. My phone buzzed again, vibrating against the table, but I didn't even flinch. Let it ring. Let them leave their frantic messages. I wasn't their safety net anymore. I finished the beer, set the empty can down, and stretched out on the lounger, my arms behind my head. The pool sparkled in front of me, and the sea stretched out forever beyond it. This was my space, my time, and they weren't welcome here. I closed my eyes, the warmth sinking into me, and decided I'd deal with them later, maybe tomorrow, maybe never. For now, I was done. The phone could buzz all it wanted. I wasn't picking it up. I woke up to the soft sound of waves crashing below my villa, the morning sun sneaking through the curtains and warming the room. It was day 4 in Santorini, and I'd started to feel like a different man, lighter, like I'd left more than just a suitcase behind. I stretched, rolled out of bed, and padded barefoot to the balcony, coffee in hand, letting the sea air wake me up properly. My phone had been off since yesterday's barrage of calls, and I wasn't in a hurry to turn it back on. Whatever mess was waiting for me could stay there. I was halfway through my coffee, watching a fishing boat bob on the horizon, when I finally caved and powered it up, just to check the time, I told myself. The screen lit up with notifications, but one stood out, a long text from Camille, sent at 3 a.m. her time. Dad, please call me. I messed up. That was it. No details, no explanation, just those words staring back at me. I set the phone down and took a deep breath, my gut telling me something big had gone down. But I wasn't ready to dive in yet. I finished my coffee, slow and deliberate, letting the bitter taste ground me. Then I scrolled back through the missed calls and voicemails, Jillian, Colin, even Aunt Noelle, but I didn't listen to them. Instead, I called Theo. He picked up on the second ring, his voice loud and amused. Man, you picked the perfect week to disappear, he said, laughing. That wedding? Total disaster. I leaned against the railing, the phone pressed to my ear, and listened as he laid it out. Turns out, Camille and Bryce didn't even make it to the cake cutting before it all fell apart. Bryce found some text on her phone from her ex, late-night messages from the night before the wedding, and lost it. They fought right there in front of everyone, voices raised, guests shifting awkwardly in their seats. Then Bryce's mom jumped in, yelling at Jillian, saying she'd pushed Camille into the marriage or some nonsense like that. Colin, true to form, got sloppy drunk and started shouting at the DJ for playing the wrong song. Theo said half the guests bailed before the first dance, and the rest just sat there, watching the chaos like a bad movie. No speeches, no sparkler send-off, no happy ending, just a big, ugly mess. I stood there, the sun climbing higher, and felt a strange mix of nothing. No shock, no sadness, just a blank space where I thought I'd feel something. So, yeah, Theo finished, still chuckling, you didn't miss much. I thanked him, hung up, and stared at Camille's text again. I messed up. Yeah, she did. But it wasn't my job to fix it, not this time. I could picture it so clear. Jillian spinning around, trying to smooth things over with that fake smile, Camille crying into her bouquet, everyone looking for someone to blame. And me? I wasn't there. They'd made sure of that. I set the phone down and walked back inside, grabbing my sandals and a towel. I didn't call her back. I didn't call Jillian either. Instead, I booked a massage at the Villa Spa, something with hot stones, the kind of thing I'd never bothered with before. The lady at the desk smiled and said I'd feel like a new man after. Good, I thought. That's what I want. The massage room smelled like lavender, and the table was warm against my back as I lay there, the therapist's hands kneading the knots out of my shoulders. I closed my eyes and let my mind drift, not to the wedding, not to Camille's tears or Jillian's excuses, but to the sound of the sea outside, the way the air felt clean here. They'd had their fairy tale day, or at least they tried, and it blew up in their faces. I wasn't smug about it, but I wasn't sorry either. I'd spent years being the one who held everything together, paying the bills, calming the fights, making sure everyone got through. And the one time I stepped away, it all crumbled. Maybe that should have made me feel needed, but it didn't. It just made me glad I was here, not there. The massage ended, and I walked out looser, lighter, the sun still high overhead. I grabbed a gyro from a stand down the street, greasy, warm, perfect, and sat on a bench overlooking the water, eating slow. My phone stayed quiet in my pocket. I didn't check it again. Whatever they wanted, it could wait. They'd figure it out, or they wouldn't. Either way, I was done running back. I was sitting on the balcony that evening, the sky turning a deep purple as the sun dipped below the horizon, when my phone lit up again. The air was cool, and I had a glass of red wine in my hand, the kind the waiter recommended, dry, strong, the way I liked it. I'd spent the day walking the cliffs, letting the sun burn away the last bits of tension in my chest, and I was finally starting to feel like this trip wasn't just an escape but something more. Then Jillian's name flashed on the screen. 3 voicemails, back to back, left sometime that afternoon. I sighed, set the wine down, and stared at it for a minute, debating whether to listen. Curiosity won out. I hit play on the first one, and her voice came through, sharp and familiar, like she was scolding me through the phone. "Look, I don't know where you are, but this is ridiculous. If you'd just been here, maybe Camille wouldn't have felt so cornered. Call me back." The second one was softer, but still dripping with that tone she used when she wanted me to feel guilty. "I'm sorry, okay? I didn't think it'd turn out like this. Just, we need to talk." The third was shorter, clipped, like she was annoyed I hadn't jumped at the first 2. "Fine, keep ignoring us. But this isn't helping anyone." I leaned back in the chair, letting the words sink in. Cornered? If I'd been there? So now it was my fault. My absence was the reason their perfect little wedding imploded. I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat, turning into a bitter snort. She was good at that, twisting things so I'd feel like the bad guy for not being where they didn't want me in the first place. Then Camille tried FaceTiming me. Her name popped up, the little ringtone jarring against the quiet. I watched it buzz, her picture flashing, that old photo from her high school graduation when she still hugged me without thinking twice. I hit decline and set the phone face down. My chest tightened, but I pushed it down with a sip of wine, letting the taste burn it away. They didn't get to do this. Not now, not after they'd made it clear I wasn't part of their plan. A few minutes later, a text came through from Aunt Noelle, Jillian's sister, the one who always acted like she knew everything. "Hey, just so you know, things might have gone differently if you'd been here to keep the balance. Camille's a mess. Call her, keep the balance." That's what they called it. Me being the one who stayed calm, who fixed the fights, who paid the bills and drove the car, and made sure everyone got through whatever mess they'd made. I'd been the peacekeeper for years, the guy who didn't yell back when Jillian snapped, who didn't walk out when Camille stopped saying thank you. And now, when I finally stepped away, they realized they needed me. Too late. I finished the wine and poured another glass, the bottle clinking against the rim. The sea was dark now, just a shimmer of moonlight on the waves, and I sat there, letting the quiet wrap around me. I could have called back. I could have picked up for Camille, listened to her cry, told her it'd be okay like I always did. I could have answered Jillian, let her talk me into coming home to sort out their chaos. But I didn't. For the first time, I didn't feel that pull, that itch to be the one who made it right. I liked this, the distance, the freedom, the way I didn't owe them anything anymore. I thought about the wedding, what Theo had told me, Bryce storming off, Jillian scrambling, Camille breaking down. I could see it so clear, them looking around, expecting me to step in, to smooth it over like I'd done 100 times before. But I wasn't there, and they didn't know how to handle it. Good. Let them figure it out. I stood up, stretched, and walked back inside, leaving the phone on the table. The villa was cool and quiet, the bed waiting with its crisp white sheets. I didn't need to be their hero, not tonight, not ever again. I climbed in, the wine still warm in my system, and closed my eyes. They'd made their choice when they left me off that list, and I'd made mine when I got on that plane. If they needed me now, they'd have to wait. I was done being the fallback guy. Sleep came easy, and I didn't dream about them at all. I was sitting at a little seaside restaurant that night, the kind with wobbly wooden tables and lanterns flickering in the breeze, when my phone rang. The air smelled like salt and grilled fish, and I had a plate of fresh seafood in front of me, octopus, shrimp, some kind of white fish I couldn't name, all drizzled with olive oil and lemon. I'd spent the day swimming in the clear water off a black sand beach, letting the waves knock me around until I was too tired to think. Now, with a glass of cold white wine in my hand, I felt good, better than good, like I was finally settling into this new version of myself. The phone buzzed against the table, and I saw Rose's name flash up. I almost didn't answer, didn't want anything breaking this moment, but something told me to pick up. "Hey," I said, leaning back in the chair. She didn't even say hello, just started laughing, so hard I could barely make out her words. "Oh my God, you missed a show," she finally managed, her voice cracking with glee. And honestly, it was beautiful watching them realize what life is like without you keeping everything glued together. I set the wine down, a grin tugging at my mouth, and listened as she spilled it all. After the wedding fell apart, things got worse. Camille had a full meltdown in front of the guests, tears streaming, mascara running, when Bryce walked out, leaving her standing there in her big white dress. Jillian tried to play it off, flitting around with that tight smile, but Rosa said you could see the panic in her eyes. She kept looking for someone to fix it, someone to take charge, and then it hit her. The only one who ever did that was me, and I was 3,000 miles away. Rosa cackled through the phone, painting the picture, Colin slurring insults at the bartender, Aunt Noelle whispering loud enough for everyone to hear that it was Jillian's fault, the DJ packing up early because no one was dancing. "They didn't know what to do without you," Rosa said, catching her breath. "It was like watching ants when you kick the hill." I speared a piece of octopus with my fork and chewed slow, letting her words sink in. I wasn't surprised, not really. I'd always been the glue, the one who stayed steady when everyone else lost it. Birthday parties, holidays, fights over money, I was the guy who made sure the lights stayed on and the yelling stopped. And now, without me, they'd crumbled. I didn't feel sorry for them. I felt satisfied, maybe. Like karma had finally showed up, right on time. Camille cried for an hour. Rosa went on. Jillian kept saying, "You should have been here," like that would have saved the day. "But you know what? They didn't want you there until they needed you." She paused, then added, "I'm proud of you for staying gone." I swallowed the food, the tangy lemon cutting through the richness, and took a sip of wine. "Yeah," I said, my voice low. "Me too." We talked a bit more about her kids, about the weather back home, then hung up. I sat there, the night settling in around me, the sound of the waves mixing with the clink of dishes from the kitchen. The restaurant was half empty, just a few locals chatting over beers, and I liked how small it felt, how far away from everything I'd left. I pictured Camille in her dress, sobbing, and Jillian spinning her excuses, and for the first time, it didn't hurt. It didn't pull me back. It just made me glad I was here, eating this food, drinking this wine, living this life they didn't get to touch. I finished the meal slow, savoring every bite, the shrimp salty and sweet, the fish flaky and soft. The waiter brought me another glass of wine without me asking, and I nodded my thanks. The bill came, and I paid it with cash, leaving a big tip because I could. I walked back to the villa under a sky full of stars, the path winding along the cliff, my sandals scuffing the stones. When I got in, I kicked them off, poured one last glass from the bottle on the counter, and stepped onto the balcony. The sea was black now, endless, and I stood there, letting the breeze cool my skin. Rosa's laugh echoed in my head, and I smiled, really smiled, the kind that reaches your eyes. I went to bed with that feeling, the sheets cool against me, and slept deeper than I had in years. They'd figured out what I was worth, but I'd figured it out too, and I wasn't giving it back. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside the villa, the kind of soft morning noise that felt like the world was stretching awake with me. The sun was just peeking over the horizon, casting a golden line across the sea, and I lay there for a minute, staring at the ceiling, letting the quiet settle in. It was day 6 in Santorini, and I'd gotten used to this, waking up without an alarm, without someone banging on the door or calling my name. I rolled out of bed, made a pot of coffee, and took it out to the balcony, the warm mug in my hand chasing off the early chill. I was halfway through my first sip when I decided to check my phone, not because I wanted to, but because I figured I couldn't dodge them forever. There was an email from Jillian waiting, sent late last night. No subject line, no dear or hey, just her words dumped onto the screen like she couldn't be bothered with the niceties. "You've made your point. Come home so we can talk." I read it twice, letting it sink in, and felt my jaw tighten. Made my point? Like this was some game, like I'd flown halfway across the world just to teach her a lesson. No apology. No, I was wrong, just that same old tone. Like I was a kid who'd stormed off and needed to get over it. I set the mug down and stared out at the water, the waves rolling and steady and slow. She didn't get it. She still thought this was about her, about them, about fixing what they'd broken. Then there was a text from Camille, a long one, sent an hour after Jillian's email. I opened it, and her words spilled out. Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I let Mom and Bryce's family talk me into the family-only thing, and I was stupid. I should have fought for you to be there. Please call me. I hate this. I read it again, slower this time, and felt a flicker of something, maybe guilt, maybe sadness, but it faded quick. She was sorry now, sure, after the wedding crashed and burned, after she realized she couldn't handle the fallout without me. But where was that sorry when she was making the list? When she let Jillian shrug me off like I didn't matter? I didn't text back. I didn't call. I typed a reply to Jillian instead, short and sharp, extended my stay. I hit send, turned the phone off, and leaned back in the chair, the coffee still warm in my hands. Let them sit with that. Let them stew in the silence they'd handed me first. I finished the coffee and got up, grabbing my sandals and a light jacket. I didn't have a plan, just wanted to walk, to feel the ground under me and the air on my face. The streets of Oahu were waking up, shopkeepers sweeping their steps, tourists snapping pictures of the white domes against the blue sky. I wandered through the alleys, the cobblestones uneven under my feet, and thought about how they still didn't see it. Jillian thought I'd come running back because she said so. Camille thought a late apology would erase the sting. They didn't understand that this wasn't a tantrum, it was me finally choosing myself. I stopped at a little cafe, ordered a pastry and another coffee, and sat outside, watching people pass by. The pastry was flaky, sweet with honey and nuts, and I ate it slow, letting the crumbs fall where they wanted. Back home, they were probably pacing, Jillian muttering about how stubborn I was, Camille biting her nails like she did when she was stressed. I could almost hear them. He'll come around. He always does. Except I wasn't. Not this time. I paid the bill and kept walking, the sun climbing higher, warming the stones around me. I found a spot overlooking the caldera, just a low wall and a drop to the sea, and sat there, my legs dangling over the edge. The wind picked up, tugging at my hair, and I closed my eyes, letting it wash over me. They'd made their bed, Jillian with her tea and her shrugs, Camille with her guest list and her tears. Now they could lie in it. I wasn't their crutch anymore. I got up, dusted off my hands, and headed back to the villa, the day stretching out ahead of me. I'd swim later, maybe grab dinner somewhere new. My phone stayed off in my pocket, and I didn't check it again. They could wait. I'd spent years jumping when they called. Now it was my turn to live, and they'd have to figure out how to do it without me. I woke up early again, the Santorini sun slipping through the shutters, painting stripes of light across the floor. It was my 7th day here, and I'd started to love these quiet mornings, coffee brewing, the sea whispering outside, no one pulling me out of bed with a problem to solve. I took my mug and stepped onto the balcony, the air still cool from the night, and sat there, letting the warmth of the cup seep into my hands. The view was the same as always, blue water, white cliffs, but it felt different today, like I was seeing it clearer. Maybe because I was starting to see myself clearer too. I sipped the coffee, slow and steady, and let my mind wander, not to Jillian's emails or Camille's texts, but further back, to all the years I'd spent fading into the background of their lives. It hit me as I sat there, the waves crashing below, how long I'd been invisible. I thought about my birthdays, how they'd forget until the last minute, Jillian tossing me a card she'd grabbed from the gas station, Camille saying, "Oh yeah, happy birthday, Dad," like it was an afterthought. I remembered the way they'd introduce me at events. "This is just Dad," like I was a piece of furniture, something you don't notice until it's gone. Jillian had a way of filling every room, her laugh loud, her stories big, and Camille picked it up young, learning to shine while I stood behind them, quiet, steady, paying the bills. I'd driven across town more times than I could count, picking Camille up from dance when it rained, fixing Jillian's car when it broke down, hauling boxes when they decided to redecorate on a whim. I'd paid for it all too, ballet shoes, prom dresses, that fancy dinner when Camille graduated, the one where they thanked the waiter more than me. And the chaos, God, the chaos. Every fight they had, every time Jillian stormed out or Camille slammed her door, I was the one who calmed it down, who talked them back to normal, who made sure the house didn't fall apart. They'd laugh about it later. "Oh, Dad's so boring, always so serious," and I'd smile, thinking that's just how it was. I leaned back in the chair, the coffee going cold, and stared out at the sea. Boring. That's what they called it. Me keeping everything together, me making sure they had what they needed. I'd been the backdrop to their lives, the guy who held the frame so they could paint whatever picture they wanted. And what did I get? A shrug. A less awkward excuse. A guest list with my name scratched off. I set the mug down and stood up, walking to the edge of the balcony, the stone rough under my hands. I thought about the wedding, how they'd planned it without me, how they'd laughed and posed and never once asked what I thought. I'd imagined that day for years, walking Camille down the aisle, giving a toast, feeling like I mattered. But they didn't see it that way. They saw me as the guy who'd show up anyway, who'd fix it if it went wrong, who'd take the hit and keep quiet. Not anymore. I turned back inside, grabbed my sandals, and headed out. The streets of Oahe were waking up again, vendors calling out, the smell of bread drifting from a bakery. I walked with no direction, just letting my feet carry me through the whitewashed alleys, the sun climbing higher. I passed a little shop selling paintings, bright colors, scenes of the sea, and stopped, watching the artist dab at a canvas. He didn't notice me, just kept working, lost in his own world. I envied that, being in the middle of something, not just holding it up for someone else. I kept going, the cobblestones warm under my soles, and found a bench overlooking the water. I sat there, the wind tugging at my shirt, and let it all spill out in my head, the years of being the backdrop, the way they'd taken me for granted, the way I'd let them. It wasn't just the wedding. It was everything. I'd given them my time, my money, my patience, and they'd given me nothing back, not even a seat at the table. I stayed there a long time, the sun moving overhead, until my stomach growled and I realized I hadn't eaten. I got up, found a taverna, and ordered a plate of grilled fish and a beer. The food was simple, good, and I ate alone, watching the sea. I wasn't the backdrop here. I was the one eating, drinking, living. And I wasn't going back to that old role, not for Jillian, not for Camille, not for anyone. I woke up to the sound of the sea again, gentle and steady, like it was calling me out of bed. It was my 8th day in Santorini, and I felt different, like the weight I'd carried for years was finally starting to lift, not all at once, but piece by piece. I made coffee, same as always, and took it to the balcony, the morning sun soft on my face. The air smelled clean, salty, and I sipped slow, letting the warmth wake me up. Today felt open, like I could do anything, and I decided to head to the beach, somewhere quiet, away from the crowds. I grabbed a towel, my sandals, and a bottle of water, then walked down the winding path from the villa, the stone smooth under my feet. The beach was small, tucked between cliffs, with dark sand that glittered in the light. Hardly anyone was there, just a few locals and a woman sitting alone near the water, reading a book. I dropped my stuff, kicked off my shoes, and waded in, the waves cool against my legs. I swam for a while, letting the current tug at me, feeling strong and free in a way I hadn't in years. When I came back to shore, dripping and salty, the woman looked up from her book and smiled, a small, easy smile, like we'd already met. "Good swim?" she asked, her voice warm, accented with something I couldn't place. "Yeah," I said, grabbing my towel. "Best part of the day so far." She laughed, and we started talking nothing big, just simple stuff about the island, the water, the way the sun hit the cliffs. Her name was Serena, a widow traveling alone, and she had this calm about her, like she'd seen enough to know what mattered. We sat there on the sand, the waves lapping close, and swapped stories. She told me about raising her son, how he'd moved off to university and left her with an empty house. I told her about Camille, not the wedding, not yet, just the early days, the recitals, and the late-night talks. We both knew what it was like to pour everything into a kid and then watch them build a life without you. There was no pressure in it, no need to impress, just two people sharing a moment. The sun climbed higher, and we decided to grab a drink at a little shack up the beach. We ordered wine, white and crisp, and sat at a rickety table, the sea stretching out in front of us. She laughed at my dumb jokes, and I liked how her eyes crinkled when she did. We talked more, about how exhausting it is to always be the responsible one, how you can love someone and still need to let go. I didn't tell her about the guest list or Jillian's emails, but I didn't have to. She got it, the quiet ache of being left behind, the relief of finding your own space. The afternoon slipped away, easy and slow, and as the sun started to dip, we walked back to the water, wine glasses in hand. We stood there, barefoot in the shallows, watching the sky turn orange and pink, then purple. Neither of us said much, just let the silence sit between us, comfortable, real. For the first time in forever, I wasn't waiting for someone to need me, wasn't aching to be seen. I was just there, with her, with the sea, and it was enough. When it got dark, we said goodnight, No promises, no plans, just a nod and a smile. I walked back to the villa alone, the night air cool against my skin, feeling lighter than I had in days. I poured one last glass of wine and stepped onto the balcony, the stars bright overhead. I pulled out my phone, snapped a picture of myself, sunglasses on, wine in hand, the ocean dark behind me, and posted it with a caption. Turns out overreacting feels like peace. I didn't check for likes or messages, just set the phone down and leaned against the railing. Serena's laugh echoed in my head, and I smiled, sipping slow. This was what I'd been missing. Not the big moments, not the thank yous I never got, but this, a day that was mine, a memory I didn't have to fight for. I wasn't sorry for leaving, wasn't sorry for staying. I finished the wine, the glass cold in my hand, and went inside. The bed was waiting, and I climbed in, the sheets soft against me. Sleep came fast, and I dreamed of the sea, not of home, not of them, just the waves and the open sky. I woke up on my last day in Santorini with the sun already high, streaming through the villa's windows like it was urging me to get moving. I'd slept hard, deep, the kind of sleep that leaves you feeling new. My flight home was that night, and I could have spent the day packing, worrying about what I'd find when I got back, but I didn't. I made coffee, took it to the balcony, and stood there, watching the sea sparkle under the morning light. 9 days here, and I wasn't the same guy who'd stepped off that plane, hurt, angry, running from a guest list that didn't have my name. Now, I felt solid, like I'd built something out here, something they couldn't touch. I finished the coffee and decided to hike, one last taste of the island before I left. I grabbed my sandals, a bottle of water, and headed out, following a trail along the cliffs. The path was rough, winding up through rocks and scrubby bushes, the sun hot on my back. I walked steady, my breath even, feeling the burn in my legs and liking it. The view opened up at the top, blue water stretching forever, white houses clinging to the hills, and I sat on a flat stone, wiping sweat from my forehead. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out. Camille again, another missed call, the third that week. I hadn't answered any of them, hadn't listened to the voicemails piling up from her and Jillian. I stared at her name on the screen, then turned the phone off. I wasn't ready, not yet. I got back to the villa by noon, showered, and packed slow, folding my shirts, tucking my sandals into the bag. I'd heard from Rosa a few days ago. Jillian had moved into Aunt Noelle's to give space, whatever that meant. Camille was still calling, still texting, but I didn't owe them my time. I sat on the bed, bag zipped, and left her one voicemail short, calm, my voice steady. When you're ready to talk like a daughter and not a PR crisis, let me know. That was it. I hung up, grabbed my stuff, and checked out, the taxi waiting to take me to the airport. The flight home was long, but I didn't mind. I watched the clouds out the window, the world shrinking below, and felt a quiet kind of strength, like I'd claimed something back out there. When I landed, the air was colder, sharper, and I drove home in the dark, the house empty when I walked in. Jillian's stuff was gone, her coats, her shoes, the clutter she always left on the counter. It didn't feel lonely, it felt clean. I dropped my bag, poured a glass of water, and stood in the kitchen, the silence thick around me. The next day, I dug out my old wedding suit, the one I'd planned to wear for Camille, the one I'd pressed and hung up months ago. It felt heavy in my hands, like a memory I didn't need anymore. I drove it to a charity shop downtown, handed it over with a nod, and walked out lighter. Back home, I found a flyer for a hiking group stuck in the mailbox, local guys who met up weekends to hit the trails. I called the number, signed up for the next one, and marked it on the calendar. That night, I cooked myself dinner, steak, simple, the way I liked it, and ate at the table. No TV, no phone, just me and the food. I thought about the wedding, Theo's stories, Rose's laugh, the way it all fell apart. I hadn't missed a thing. They'd had their day, their chaos, and I'd had mine, 9 days of sun and sea and peace. If they thought I was overreacting, let them. I wasn't coming back to the old me, the guy who waited for them to see him, who fixed their messes and took their shrugs. I washed the dishes, slow and careful, the water warm on my hands. The house was mine now, not theirs, not anymore. I went to bed early, the sheets cool, and slept without dreaming. The next morning, I woke up to rain tapping the windows, soft and steady. I made coffee, sat by the glass, and watched it fall. Camille would call again, maybe. Jillian might show up, bags in hand, expecting me to take her back. But I wasn't waiting for them. I had my hikes, my quiet, my life. They'd underestimated me, and I was fine with that. I wasn't the backdrop anymore. I was the whole damn story. I was sitting on the couch, flipping through channels, trying to find something to fill the quiet evening, when the front door swung open and my whole world flipped upside down. Camilla, my wife of nearly 2 decades, walked in like she owned the place, which, to be fair, she always did. But this time, she wasn't alone. There was a guy with her, some slick-haired jerk with a smirk that made my stomach twist. He had this air about him, like he'd already won something I didn't even know we were competing for. And then there was this little girl, maybe 5 years old, clinging to Camilla's hand, her big eyes darting around the room like she wasn't sure where she'd landed. I froze, my thumb still hovering over the remote, the TV buzzing faintly in the background. Camilla didn't even look at me at first. She just marched in, dropped her purse on the counter, and turned to me with this cold, hard stare I'd never seen before. "Sign these divorce papers and leave now," she said, her voice flat, like she was telling me to take out the trash. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even a fight. It was an order, like I was some hired help she was done with. I blinked, trying to process it, my heart thumping in my chest like it was trying to break free and run. Divorce papers? Leave now? What the hell was happening? Next to me, Julian, my 16-year-old son, sat stiff as a board on the couch. He'd been scrolling on his phone, probably texting his friends or watching some dumb video, but now his screen was dark, his hands gripping the thing like it was a lifeline. His jaw was tight, and I could see the fire flickering in his eyes, even though he didn't say a word. He's always been like that, quiet when he's mad, but you can feel it rolling off him in waves. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the silence, but my tongue felt heavy, stuck to the roof of my mouth. Camilla didn't wait for me to catch up. She reached into her bag, pulled out a stack of papers, and slapped them down on the coffee table in front of me. The sound echoed in the room, sharp and final. "This is done," she said, crossing her arms. "We're done." The guy Trent, she called him later, shifted behind her, looking smug, like he was enjoying the show. The little girl, Ava, just stood there, her tiny fingers wrapped around Camilla's, staring at me like I was some stranger she'd never seen before. Maybe I was. I looked at the papers, the black ink blurring a little as my eyes tried to focus. Divorce. She wasn't kidding. After 18 years, 2 houses, 1 kid, and a million little fights I thought we'd survived, she was standing there telling me to pack up and get out. My house. Our house. The one I'd painted, fixed, lived in for years while she was off finding herself on her endless work trips. I felt my hands clench into fists, the remote digging into my palm. "Camilla," I finally managed, my voice rough, like I hadn't used it in days. "What is this? Who are these people?" She rolled her eyes, like I was the idiot for asking. "This is my life now," she said, gesturing to Trent and Ava like they were some prize she'd won. "You've been sitting here, doing nothing, while I've been building something real. Sign the papers, take your stuff, and go." Her words hit me like a punch, each one sinking deeper into my gut. Nothing? I'd raised Julian. I'd kept this house running. I'd waited for her, night after night, while she drifted further away. And now she was rewriting the story, making me the loser who didn't matter. I glanced at Julian again, hoping he'd say something, anything, to back me up. He didn't. He just stared at his mom, his eyes narrowing, like he was sizing her up. I could tell he was hurt. Hell, I was hurt. But he wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing it. Neither was I. Not yet. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, trying to keep my breathing steady. "You can't just walk in here and kick me out," I said, keeping my voice low, controlled. "This is my home too." Camilla laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that made the hairs on my neck stand up. "Your home? You've got no job, no money, no nothing. You're lucky I didn't do this sooner." She thought she had me pinned, helpless, ready to slink away with my tail between my legs. Trent smirked again, and I wanted to wipe that look off his face with my fist. But I didn't move. I just sat there, letting her words bounce around in my head, trying to figure out how the woman I'd loved for half my life had turned into this stranger standing in front of me. The little girl tugged on Camilla's hand, whispering something I couldn't hear. Camilla bent down, murmured something back, and then straightened up, brushing her off like an annoyance. That's when I really looked at Ava, her dark hair, her round face. She didn't look like Julian. She didn't look like me. But she had Camilla's nose, maybe her chin. My stomach dropped. How long had this been going on? How long had my wife been living a double life while I was here, playing dad, playing husband, thinking we were still a family? I felt sick, the room spinning a little as the pieces started clicking together. Trent wasn't just some new guy. Ava wasn't just some kid she'd picked up somewhere. This was planned. This was her escape hatch, and I was the dead weight she was cutting loose. "Dad," Julian said suddenly, his voice cutting through the fog in my head. I turned to him, and he nodded at me, just once, like he was telling me to hold on. He didn't look at his mom, didn't even acknowledge Trent or the girl. He just kept his eyes on me, steady and sure. It was enough to pull me back, to keep me from falling apart right there in front of them. I took a deep breath, letting it out slow, and looked back at Camilla. "I'm not signing anything tonight," I said, my voice stronger now. "You don't get to waltz in here and blow everything up without a fight." Her eyes flashed, annoyed, like she hadn't expected me to push back. Trent shifted, his smirk fading a little. And Julian? He just sat there, silent, waiting. Whatever was coming next, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I sat there on the couch, staring at Camilla as she stood across from me, her arms crossed and her eyes gleaming with something I could only describe as victory. She thought she had me cornered, like a rat in a trap, and she was savoring every second of it. The divorce papers still sat on the coffee table between us, untouched, mocking me with their crisp white edges. Trent, her new boyfriend, leaned against the kitchen counter like he already owned the place, his slick hair catching the light, his smug grin making my skin crawl. And Ava, that little 5-year-old girl, stood by Camilla's side, her tiny hand still gripping my wife's fingers, looking lost in the middle of this mess. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a rope around it and kept pulling, but I couldn't let it show. Not with Julian sitting next to me, his silence louder than any words he could have said. Camilla thought I had nothing. No job, no power, no fight left in me. She was wrong, but I wasn't ready to show my hand yet. For years, I'd been the one holding things together. When Camilla decided her career was more important than us, I didn't argue. I stayed home, raised Julian, made sure he had food on the table, a clean shirt for school, someone to talk to when the world got heavy. She'd always been ambitious, traveling for weeks at a time, chasing promotions, telling me it was all for our future. I believed her back then. I'd cook dinner, keep the house running, and wait for her calls that came less and less often. She'd breeze in for a weekend, all smiles and expensive perfume, then vanish again. I didn't chase her. Maybe I should have. Maybe that's why she thought she could walk in here now, with this Trent guy and a kid I'd never seen before, and just erase me like I was some smudge on her perfect life. "You've been a ghost in this marriage for years," she said, her voice sharp, cutting. "I've moved on. You should too. Moved on." Like it was that simple. I looked at Trent again, trying to figure out who this guy was. He wasn't some random fling. He carried himself like he'd been around a while, like he knew things about my wife I didn't. His suit was pressed, his shoes polished, the kind of guy who spent more time in front of a mirror than I'd spent fixing the leaky sink last month. And Ava, she wasn't mine. That much was clear. Her dark eyes flicked between me and Camilla, unsure, like she was waiting for someone to tell her what to do. I did the math in my head. 5 years old. Camilla's trips had gotten longer around then, her excuses flimsier. I'd chalked it up to work stress, to her needing space. Now I saw it for what it was, a lie. She'd been building a whole other life while I was here, playing the fool, thinking we were still a team. "You expect me to just walk away?" I asked, keeping my voice steady even though my hands were shaking a little. I shoved them into my lap so she wouldn't see. "After everything I've done for this family?" Camilla laughed, a cold, brittle sound that bounced off the walls. "Family? You mean sitting around, pretending to be a writer while I paid the bills? I've been carrying us, and I'm tired of it." That stung. I'd given up my job years ago. Yeah, but it was for Julian. For her. She'd begged me to stay home so she could climb the ladder, and I did it because I loved her. Now she was twisting it, making it sound like I was some lazy bum leeching off her success. I wanted to yell, to tell her how many nights I'd stayed up with Julian when he was sick, how many times I'd fixed this house with my own hands, how I'd kept us afloat when her career didn't cover the mortgage. But I didn't. Not yet. Julian shifted beside me, his knee brushing mine. I could feel the tension in him, like a coiled spring ready to snap. He hadn't said a word since she walked in, but his eyes were locked on her, watching every move. He knew more than he was letting on, I could sense it. He'd always been sharp, picking up on things I missed. Maybe he'd seen this coming. Maybe he'd heard her on the phone, caught whispers of Trent or Ava when I was too busy to notice. I wanted to ask him, to lean over and whisper, "What do you know, kid?" But this wasn't the moment. Camilla was still talking, laying out her victory speech like she'd rehearsed it in the car. "Trent and I have something real," she said, glancing at him with a smile I hadn't seen in years. "Ava's part of that. You're not." Her words landed heavy, each one a brick piling up between us. I looked at the little girl again, her small face framed by dark curls. She didn't deserve this, being dragged into a fight she couldn't understand. But Camilla didn't care. She was too busy rewriting our history, painting me as the failure so she could feel good about walking away. I leaned back on the couch, forcing myself to breathe, to think. She thought I was weak because I didn't scream, didn't throw things, didn't beg her to stay. She didn't know me at all. "You're making a mistake," I said quietly, meeting her eyes. She smirked, like she'd already won. "No, you're the one who's been living a mistake. Sign the papers, and let's end this." I didn't touch the papers. I just sat there, letting her words hang in the air, feeling the weight of Trent's stare and Ava's confusion. Julian's silence was a wall beside me, solid and strong. Camilla thought she'd blindsided me, that I'd crumble under her big reveal. But I'd spent years learning to be patient, to wait, to watch. She didn't know I'd been keeping score, not with anger, but with facts. The house, the money, the truth. She thought she was serving me betrayal on a silver platter, cold and final. She didn't realize I wasn't ready to eat it. Not yet. I glanced at Julian again, and he gave me the smallest nod, like he was saying, "We've got this." Maybe we did. Maybe this wasn't the end she thought it was. I watched Camilla as she stood there, her posture stiff and confident, like she'd spent months plotting this moment in her head. She had it all figured out, didn't she? The divorce papers still sat on the coffee table, glaring at me, daring me to pick them up and sign my life away. She'd walked in here with Trent and Ava like they were her shiny new trophies, and I was just the old, broken thing she was tossing out. "We've been apart for years," she said, her voice smooth, practiced. "We're practically strangers. It's time you moved on." She didn't even look at Julian, didn't acknowledge the boy sitting next to me who'd spent his whole life waiting for her to come home. It was like he didn't exist in her new little world. I leaned forward, resting my arms on my knees, trying to keep my hands from shaking. She was so sure of herself, so certain she'd planned every step of this perfectly. And maybe she had, up until now. She kept talking, laying it out like she was reading from a script. "This house isn't yours anymore," she said, waving a hand around like she was already redecorating it in her mind. "I've got a family now, Trent, Ava, me. You don't fit here." Her words were sharp, meant to cut, and they did. I felt them slice through me, stirring up a mix of anger and hurt I didn't want to show. She thought I'd just nod, grab a bag, and slink out the door, leaving her to play house with this guy who looked like he spent more on hair gel than I did on groceries. Trent stood there, arms crossed, nodding along like he was part of the plan too. Ava stayed quiet, her big eyes flicking between us, probably wondering why the grown-ups were so mad. I wanted to ask Camilla how long she'd been cooking this up, how many nights she'd lied to me about work trips, while she was off starting a new life. But I didn't. I just listened, letting her spill it all out. She thought she knew me, thought I was some washed-up guy with no backbone, no fight. For years, I'd let her take the lead because I loved her, because I wanted her to be happy. When she said she needed to travel for her job, I stayed home with Julian. When she said she needed space, I gave it to her. I didn't push, didn't pry, didn't demand answers when she came back smelling like someone else's cologne. I trusted her. And now she was using that trust against me, spinning it like I'd been the one drifting away. "You've had your chance," she said, her tone final. "I'm done pretending this works." Pretending. That word stuck in my throat, bitter and hard to swallow. I'd spent years building a life with her, raising our son, keeping this house warm for her to come back to. And she'd been pretending? I glanced at Ava again, that little girl who didn't ask for any of this. She was proof Camilla hadn't just moved on, she'd built something else entirely. 5 years old. That meant this wasn't some fling that started last month. This was years in the making, years of lies piling up while I was here, fixing Julian's lunches and patching holes in the drywall. I felt my jaw tighten, my teeth grinding together as I tried to keep my cool. Camilla didn't notice. She was too busy laying out her perfect plan. "I'll take the house," she said. "You can find somewhere else. It's only fair." Fair. She had the nerve to talk about fair when she'd been cheating, lying, and planning this ambush behind my back. I wanted to laugh, but it caught in my chest, turning into something heavy instead. Julian shifted next to me, his sneakers scuffing the floor. He still hadn't said anything, but I could feel him listening, taking it all in. He was smarter than me sometimes, quicker to see through people. I wondered what he was thinking, if he'd caught on to his mom's game before I did. I wanted to reach over, put a hand on his shoulder, tell him we'd be okay. But I didn't move. I kept my eyes on Camilla, watching her play her part. She thought the house was hers because her dad had bought it years ago, back when we were first married. She figured it was still in his name, or hers by default now that he was gone. She didn't know what I knew. She hadn't bothered to check the details, too busy with her big exit strategy to dig into the paperwork. That was her mistake. You really think it's that easy? I said, my voice low, cutting through her monologue. She stopped, her head tilting slightly, like she wasn't used to me talking back. What? She snapped, annoyed. You think you've got some claim here? You've got nothing, no leverage. She was so sure, so cocky. Trent smirked again, like he was in on the joke. I let the silence stretch out for a second, just long enough to make her shift uncomfortably. The house, I said, leaning back on the couch, crossing my arms. It's not yours to take. Her eyes narrowed, confusion flickering across her face. What are you talking about? Dad left it to me. She was so certain, clinging to that old story she'd told herself. I shook my head, slow and deliberate. No, Camilla. He didn't. She froze, her mouth opening like she wanted to argue, but didn't know where to start. For the first time since she walked in, that smug look of hers faltered. She didn't know about the deed, about the quiet meeting I'd had with her dad years ago when he saw how she was treating us. He'd signed it over to me, not her, because he trusted me with Julian, with the home he built. It was all legal, locked away in a file she'd never bothered to look at. I didn't say all that yet. I just let her stew in it, let her wonder what else she'd missed. Trent glanced at her, his smirk fading, like he wasn't so sure about her plan anymore. Ava tugged on Camilla's hand, whispering something, but Camilla shushed her, too rattled to focus. Julian stayed quiet, but I caught the faintest hint of a smile on his face, like he knew I just flipped the board. She thought this was all according to her plan. She was wrong, and I wasn't done yet. I sat there, watching Camilla's face twist as my words sank in. The house isn't yours to take, I'd said, and now she was staring at me like I'd just spoken a different language. Her confidence, that rock-solid certainty she'd walked in with, was cracking right in front of me. She'd assumed she had everything locked down, Trent by her side, Ava as her new little prop, and this house as her prize. She thought she could shove those divorce papers in my face, and I'd just roll over, tail between my legs, and let her have it all. But I wasn't the pushover she'd painted me as, and this house, the one I'd poured years into, wasn't hers to claim. Not anymore. I leaned back on the couch, crossing my arms, letting her stew in the silence. Julian sat next to me, still as a statue, but I could feel his eyes on me, waiting for what came next. Camilla shook her head, her lips pressing into a thin line. That's impossible, she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Dad would never, she trailed off, like she couldn't even finish the thought. She was so sure her father had left this place to her, some unspoken inheritance she'd always counted on. She'd grown up here. After all, her childhood was carved into the scratches on the doorframes, the faded marks on the walls. When we got married, her dad handed us the keys, a wedding gift wrapped in a big red bell. She figured that meant it was hers forever. But she didn't know the whole story, didn't know what happened after she started drifting away from us. I did. I'd kept it quiet, tucked away, because I never thought I'd need to use it. Until now. Years ago, her dad, Tom, started seeing through her. He was a gruff old guy, not big on words, but he loved Julian more than anything. He'd come over sometimes, sit on the porch with me while Julian played in the yard, and we'd talk. Not about much, just the weather, the kid, how the house was holding up. But one day, after Camilla had been gone for weeks on another business trip, he looked at me, his eyes tired, and said, "She's not the girl I raised." I didn't argue. I just nodded, because I'd been feeling it too. She'd stopped calling him, stopped checking in, too busy with her big life to care about the old man who'd given her everything. He saw how I stuck around, how I kept things steady for Julian while she chased whatever it was she was after. And he didn't like it, not one bit. So one afternoon, he showed up with a stack of papers and a notary. "This house is yours," he said, his voice rough but firm. "Not hers. You're the one who's earned it." I tried to argue, told him it wasn't right, that Camilla would lose her mind if she ever found out. But he wouldn't hear it. "She's made her choices," he said. "I'm making mine." He signed the deed over to me, just like that, all legal and binding. It was filed away, locked in a drawer I hadn't touched since he passed 2 years ago. I never told Camilla. Why would I? She was barely around, and when she was, she didn't care about the house, only about what it looked like to her fancy friends. She assumed it was still hers because she never bothered to check. That was her mistake, and now it was mine to play. "What do you mean? It's not mine," she said now, her voice rising, panic creeping in. She stepped forward, her hands balling into fists. "This was Dad's house. He gave it to us, to me." I shook my head again, slow and steady, keeping my eyes on hers. "He gave it to me, Camilla. Years ago. After he saw how you treated him. How you treated Julian." Her mouth opened, then closed, like a fish gasping for air. She didn't want to believe it, couldn't wrap her head around the idea that her own father had picked me over her. Trent shifted behind her, his smug look gone, replaced by something uneasy. He didn't know this part of the plan either. I could tell. "Good. Let him sweat too." "You're lying," she said, but it sounded weak, like she was trying to convince herself more than me. "He wouldn't do that. He loved me." I shrugged, keeping my voice calm. "He did, but he loved Julian more, and he trusted me to take care of him. You weren't here, Camilla." "I was." That hit her hard. I saw it in the way her shoulders stiffened, the way her eyes flicked away for a second. She hated being reminded of what she'd missed, all those years she'd left us behind. She built this story in her head where she was the hero, the hard-working mom who'd sacrificed everything. But the truth was she'd sacrificed us, me, Julian, her dad, for whatever she had with Trent and Ava. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and scrolled to a photo I'd kept, a scanned copy of the deed, just in case. I held it up, letting her see the date, the signatures, the notary stamp. "It's all here," I said. "Legal and done. You can check the county records if you want." Her face went pale, the color draining out like someone had pulled a plug. She grabbed the phone from my hand, her fingers trembling as she zoomed in, reading every word. Trent leaned over her shoulder, his brow furrowing. "This can't be right," he muttered, but he didn't sound so sure anymore. Ava stayed quiet, clutching Camilla's leg, her little face confused. I almost felt bad for her, almost. Camilla shoved the phone back at me, her eyes blazing. "This doesn't change anything," she said, but her voice shook. "I'll fight this. You can't keep me out." I smiled, just a little, because for the first time since she walked in, I felt the ground steady under me. "You can try," I said, "but it's my name on the deed, not yours." She glared at me, her perfect plan crumbling, and I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to find a way to claw back control. Julian finally moved beside me, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. He didn't say anything, but his presence was enough. We were in this together, and she didn't see that coming. Her plan was falling apart, and I wasn't going anywhere. I sat there, the phone still in my hand from showing Camilla the deed, watching her scramble to hold on to whatever was left of her plan. She'd come in here so sure of herself, thinking she could bulldoze me out of my own life with a stack of papers and a smug boyfriend. Now she was rattled, her eyes darting around like she was looking for an escape hatch that wasn't there. "This doesn't change anything," she'd said, but the tremble in her voice told a different story. She was losing her grip, and I could feel it. Trent stood behind her, his arms crossed tight, looking like a guy who'd just realized he'd bet on the wrong horse. Ava clung to Camilla's leg, her small face scrunched up, probably picking up on the tension in the room. Julian stayed quiet next to me, his hands resting on his knees, but I knew he was watching everything, soaking it in. I'd kept my silence for years, letting her lies pile up, but now it was my turn to push back. "That's fine," Camilla said, forcing her voice to steady. "We'll go to court. You still owe me alimony for wasting my youth." She tossed her hair back, trying to claw back some of that confidence she'd walked in with. Wasting her youth? I almost laughed, but it stuck in my throat, turning into a bitter taste instead. She thought she could flip this around, make me the bad guy for staying home while she chased her dreams. I set the phone down on the coffee table, slow and deliberate, letting her words hang there. "Your youth," I said, keeping my tone even. "I raised Julian while you were gone. I kept this house together. I paid the bills when your big career didn't cover them. You don't get to call that wasting anything." Her eyes flashed, annoyed that I wasn't crumbling like she'd expected. "You had it easy," she snapped. "Sitting here, playing house, while I worked my ass off. You owe me for that." "Easy?" I thought about the nights Julian cried himself to sleep because she didn't call, the times I stretched a paycheck to cover the heat because her trips ate up the budget. I thought about the years I put my own life on hold so she could climb her ladder, believing it was for us. I didn't say any of that, not yet. I just looked at her, letting her stew in her own nonsense. She didn't know I'd been keeping track, not out of spite, but because I had to. I'd saved every receipt, every bank statement, every text where she promised she'd be home soon. I wasn't planning revenge back then. I was just surviving. Now, though, it was all coming in handy. I reached under the couch, where I'd stashed a file folder earlier that week. I've been digging through old papers, trying to make sense of our finances, when I found more than I'd bargained for. I pulled it out now, a plain manila thing, worn at the edges, and set it next to the divorce papers. Camilla's eyes flicked to it, suspicious. "What's that?" she asked, her voice sharp. I didn't answer right away. I just opened it, slow and careful, and pulled out a stack of photos and emails I printed. "This," I said, sliding the first photo across the table, "is you and Trent. For years ago. At that conference in Chicago." Her face went pale, the color draining out like water from a cracked glass. The photo showed them at a hotel bar, her laughing, him leaning in too close. It wasn't much on its own, but there were more: receipts from dinners, plane tickets, a whole trail she'd left behind. "Where did you get that?" she demanded, her voice rising. Trent stepped forward, his jaw tight, but he didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I could see the panic in his eyes. "Doesn't matter," I said, calm as I could manage. "What matters is it's been going on a lot longer than you're pretending. For years, Camilla. We were still married. Still a family." I slid another paper over, an email from Trent, dated 3 years back, talking about their future. She grabbed it, her hand shaking, scanning the words like she could make them disappear. "This is nothing," she said, but it sounded weak, desperate. "You can't prove anything." I shrugged, leaning back again. "Maybe not in court. Not yet. But I've got enough to make it messy. And I will, if you push me." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find the right comeback. For years, she'd counted on my silence, my patience. I didn't fight when she pulled away, didn't yell when she stopped coming home. I let her lie because I didn't want to break what was left of us, for Julian's sake, for mine. But now she was trying to take everything, to erase us like we had never mattered. That's where she crossed the line. "You think you're so smart," she muttered, tossing the email back on the table. "What's your plan? Huh? Drag this out? Bleed me dry?" I shook my head. "I didn't want this, Camilla. You did. You're the one who brought him here, brought her." I nodded at Ava, who flinched a little at the attention. "You made this mess. I'm just cleaning it up." Trent finally spoke, his voice low, edgy. "You're bluffing. You've got nothing real." I turned to him, meeting his stare. "You sure about that? You think I've been sitting here twiddling my thumbs while you two played house?" He didn't answer, just looked away, his confidence slipping. Camilla tried to rally, crossing her arms again. "Fine. Keep your stupid house. I'll still get what's mine." She was grasping now, clutching at anything to save face. I didn't argue. I just watched her, letting her lies crash against my silence. She'd underestimated me for years, thought I was too soft, too weak to fight back. She didn't know I'd been building a shield all this time, piece by piece, waiting for the day she'd force my hand. Julian shifted beside me, his elbow brushing mine. I glanced at him, and he gave me that same small nod he'd given before, like he was saying, "Keep going." He'd seen it too, her lies, her games. He'd been quiet, but he wasn't blind. I turned back to Camilla, my voice steady. "You want to fight dirty? Go ahead. But I've got more than you think." She glared at me, her plan unraveling, and I could see the doubt creeping in. She'd thought she could bury me with her betrayal. Instead, my silence, my years of watching, waiting, was about to bury her. I sat there, the file of photos and emails still spread out on the coffee table, watching Camilla try to piece her crumbling plan back together. She'd gone pale when I showed her the proof of her affair, for years of lies laid out in black and white. And now she was scrambling, her eyes flicking between me and Trent like she wasn't sure who to blame. She'd walked in here thinking I was some broke, clueless nobody she could sweep out of her life. But I'd just turned the tables with the house deed and the evidence of her cheating. She muttered something under her breath, too low for me to catch, then straightened up, forcing that fake confidence back into her voice. "I can't believe this," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. You've just been sitting here writing blogs and burning toast." She waved a hand at me, like I was some sad joke she'd outgrown. That's when Julian finally broke his silence, and everything changed. He stood up from the couch, slow and deliberate, his sneakers scuffing the floor as he moved. "Mom, you really don't know?" he said, his voice steady, cutting through the tension like a knife. I turned to him, my heart thumping, wondering what he was up to. He didn't look at me, just kept his eyes on Camilla, calm and sure. He walked over to the coffee table, reached past the divorce papers in my file, and picked up a hardcover book I'd left there a few days ago. It was thick, with a dark blue cover and gold lettering, The Silent Watcher. He held it out to her, his expression unreadable. He wrote this, Julian said, nodding at me. He's M.J. Clark. Camilla's jaw dropped, her eyes widening as she stared at the book like it was a bomb about to go off. Trent frowned, confused, but she knew exactly what it meant. That book had been everywhere, bookstores, billboards, even a TV ad last month saying it was getting a streaming deal. And she had no idea it was mine. I felt my stomach flip, a mix of pride and nerves hitting me all at once. I'd never told her about it, not the writing, not the pen name, not the success. For years, I'd been scribbling stories while Julian slept, tapping away on my laptop after fixing dinner or patching the house. It started as a way to keep my mind busy when Camilla was gone, a quiet escape from the loneliness creeping in. I didn't think much of it at first, just words to fill the empty nights. But then I sent one to a publisher under a fake name, M.J. Clark, because I didn't want anyone tying it back to me. It sold. Then it exploded. The royalties started rolling in, more money than I'd ever seen, all tucked away in a separate account she never knew about. I didn't flaunt it, didn't buy fancy cars or brag to friends. I kept it quiet, used it to pay off the house, save for Julian's future. Camilla thought I was some deadbeat because I didn't punch a clock. She didn't know I'd been out-earning her for years. She snatched the book from Julian's hand, her fingers trembling as she flipped it open, scanning the title page like she could prove it was a lie. This can't be you, she stammered, her voice shaky. You're not. She didn't finish, just kept staring at the words, her whole world tilting. I leaned back on the couch, crossing my arms, letting her process it. It's me, I said, simple and straight. Been me for a while now. Her head snapped up, her eyes locking on mine, and I saw something new there, panic, maybe even fear. She built this story in her head where I was nothing, a loser she could ditch without a second thought. Now she was holding proof she'd been wrong, and it was hitting her hard. Trent stepped closer, peering over her shoulder at the book. What's the big deal? He asked, his voice edgy, like he didn't get why she was freaking out. Camilla turned to him, her face tight. This is a bestseller, she said, almost whispering. It's worth millions. And he wrote it. Trent's eyes widened, his smug grin gone, replaced by something greedy and nervous. He looked at me like I'd just turned into a different person, and I guess in a way, I had. To them, I'd been the quiet guy in the background, the one they could ignore. Now I was the guy with a secret they couldn't touch, and it was driving them crazy. How? Camilla demanded, turning back to me, the book still clutched in her hands. When did you even? She couldn't finish the question, too rattled to make sense of it. I shrugged, keeping my voice calm. While you were gone. Nights, mostly. Had a lot of time to think. That stung her. I saw it in the way her mouth twitched. She hated being reminded of how much she'd left behind, how many hours I'd spent alone while she was off with Trent. Julian sat back down next to me, his expression steady, but I caught the faintest smirk on his face. He'd known about the book for months, found it on my desk one day, and put it together. He didn't tell anyone, just kept my secret, proud in his own quiet way. Camilla flipped through the pages, her hands shaking, then stopped, looking at me again. You hid this from me, she said, her voice low, accusing. All this time, you were, what? Laughing at me? I shook my head. I wasn't hiding it to hurt you. I just didn't need you to know. That was the truth. I didn't write it for her, didn't do any of it for her. It was mine, something she couldn't take away. She stared at me, the book slipping a little in her grip, and I could see the gears turning in her head. She'd thought she had me pegged, thought she could walk all over me. Now she was holding proof she'd misjudged everything, and it was tearing her apart. Julian leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. You didn't see him, Mum, he said, his voice quiet but firm. You never did. That hit her like a slap. She flinched, her eyes darting to him, then back to me. For the first time since she walked in, she didn't have a comeback. Trent shifted, looking uncomfortable, like he wanted to bolt. Ava stayed silent, watching it all unfold. The room felt heavy, the air thick with everything she'd missed. That book wasn't just words on a page, it was the life I'd built without her, the strength she didn't know I had. And it changed everything. I watched Camilla clutch that book, The Silent Watcher, like it was the last piece of her plan she could hold on to. Her face was a mess of shock and anger, her fingers digging into the cover as she tried to wrap her head around the fact that I wasn't the nobody she'd thought I was. Julian's words, "You never saw him, Mum," still hung in the air, heavy and true, and I could see them cutting into her. She'd walked in here with Trent and Ava, thinking she'd blindsided me, thinking she could kick me out of my own life with a few signatures. But I just dropped 2 bombs, the house was mine, and I was MJ Clark, the guy behind $1 million book. Now she was blinking fast, stammering, trying to find a way to claw back control. "The royalties," she said suddenly, her voice sharp, desperate. "Those are marital assets, right? I'm entitled to half." She was grasping, reaching for anything to turn this around. I just smiled, slow and easy, because she didn't know the best part yet. Trent perked up at that, his greedy eyes lighting up like he'd just heard a cash register ding. "Yeah," he said, stepping closer, his voice eager. "That's how it works, isn't it? You can't keep all that money to yourself." He looked at me like I was some vault he could crack open, like he'd already started spinning my royalties in his head. Camilla nodded, latching onto his words, her confidence flickering back. "We were married when you wrote it," she said, pointing at the book. "That means it's ours, mine too." She thought she'd found her lifeline, a way to salvage her big exit. I let her talk, let her build up that hope, because watching it crash was going to be sweeter than anything I could say. Julian shifted beside me, his elbow brushing mine, and I knew he was waiting for it too. He'd seen the papers. I'd told him bits and pieces, but he didn't know the whole play yet. I leaned forward, resting my arms on my knees, keeping my voice calm. "No, Camilla," I said, meeting her eyes. "The divorce was finalized 2 weeks ago. You signed without reading the fine print again." Her mouth dropped open, the book slipping from her hands and hitting the floor with a dull thud. Trent froze, his face going slack. Ava looked up, confused, but stayed quiet, clinging to Camilla's leg. I reached for the divorce papers she'd slapped on the table when she walked in, flipping through them to the last page. There it was, her signature, scrawled in her usual rushed cursive, dated 2 weeks back when I'd sent them through her lawyer. She'd been so eager to get rid of me, so sure she was winning, that she didn't even glance at what she was signing. "You agreed to everything," I said, tapping the page. "No alimony, no assets, no claims. It's done." She lunged for the papers, snatching them from my hands, her eyes scanning the lines like she could undo it with sheer willpower. This can't be right," she stammered, her voice shaking. I wouldn't," she stopped, her finger hovering over her signature, the proof she couldn't deny. "I'd hired a lawyer months ago, kept it quiet, started the process when I found out about Trent and Ava. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted out, clean and simple. The lawyer drafted it tight, made sure my royalties and the house stayed mine, and buried it in legalese she'd never bothered to read. She'd signed it in a hurry, probably thinking she'd deal with the details later, after she'd kicked me out. She didn't know I'd already filed it, didn't know the judge had stamped it final. She'd played herself, and now she was realizing it. Trent's face went red, his hands balling into fists. "You tricked her," he snapped, stepping toward me like he wanted to start something. I didn't flinch, just looked at him, steady and calm. "No," I said. "She tricked herself. Should have read what she was signing." He glared at me, but he didn't move closer. He knew he was out of his depth now, caught in a mess he hadn't planned for. Camilla dropped the papers back on the table, her hands trembling, her eyes wild. "You can't do this," she said, her voice breaking. "I'll fight it. I'll get a lawyer, take you to court." I cut her off, shaking my head. "It's over, Camilla. Court's done. You've got nothing to fight with." She stared at me, her breath coming fast, like she was drowning in her own mistake. For years, she'd underestimated me, thought I was some soft, quiet guy she could walk over. She didn't know I'd learned to play the long game, to watch and wait while she dug her own hole. Julian finally spoke up, leaning back on the couch with a small, satisfied smile. "You thought Dad was clueless," he said, his voice low, almost amused. "He's been playing chess while you were playing checkers." That hit her hard. I saw it in the way her shoulders slumped, the way her eyes flicked to him, then away. She'd lost him too, and she knew it. He wasn't her little boy anymore. He was my son, through and through. I stood up, stretching a little, feeling the weight of the night start to lift off me. "You want it out," I said, looking at her. "You've got it. Take Trent, take Ava, take whatever you've built. Just don't expect me to pay for it." She didn't answer, couldn't. Maybe. Trent grabbed her arm, muttering something about figuring this out, but his voice was shaky, his bravado gone. Ava tugged on Camilla's hand, whispering, "Are we leaving?" Camilla nodded, dazed, like she was moving on autopilot. They'd come in here so sure they'd won, so ready to rewrite my life. Now they were walking out with nothing but the clothes on their backs and a divorce they didn't even understand. I watched them head for the door, Camilla's step slow, Trent's shoulders hunched. Julian stayed on the couch, his smile fading into something quieter, more real. "You okay, Dad?" he asked, looking up at me. I nodded, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Yeah," I said. "We're good." The door clicked shut behind them, and the house went still, just me and Julian and the life we'd keep building. Camilla thought she'd ended me, but she just set me free. The divorce was final, and for once, I was the one holding all the pieces. I stood there in the living room, the echo of the front door clicking shut still ringing in my ears as Camilla, Trent, and Ava disappeared into the night. The house felt quieter now, emptier in a way that wasn't bad, just different. Julian sat on the couch, his legs stretched out, looking at me with those steady eyes of his, waiting for me to say something. The divorce papers, the book, my file of evidence, it was all still scattered on the coffee table, a messy pile of proof that we just won a fight I hadn't even wanted to start. Camilla had come in here with her big plan, thinking she could take everything, the house, the money, our whole life, and leave me with nothing. But I turned it around, kept what was mine, and now she was gone, stuck with the mess she'd made. I took a deep breath, letting it out slow, and looked at Julian. "You hungry?" I asked, because after all that, I needed something normal to hold on to. He grinned, just a little, and nodded. "Yeah, Dad. Pizza." I smiled back. "Pizza it is." We ordered from the place down the street, the one we'd been going to since he was a kid, and while we waited, I started picking up the papers. Camilla's signature stared up at me from the divorce decree, final and binding, a mark of her own undoing. She tried to play me, tried to plead and blame and negotiate her way back into control after I dropped the truth about the house and the book. First, she'd begged. "We can work this out," she'd said, her voice soft, fake sweet, like she hadn't just tried to kick me out. When that didn't work, she'd turn nasty, spitting out, "You're selfish, keeping all this from me." I didn't bite. I just stood there, calm as I could, and let her rant. Finally, she tried to bargain, offering to split things fair if I gave her a cut of the royalties. I shut that down fast. "You wanted freedom," I told her, my voice firm. "You've got it. Live with your choices." She didn't like that, her face twisted up, angry and helpless, but she couldn't argue. She'd signed her way out, and I wasn't giving her a dime more than I had to. The pizza came, and Julian and I sat at the kitchen table, eating straight from the box like we used to when he was little. He didn't say much at first, just chewed and watched me, like he was making sure I was okay. I was, mostly. It hurt, seeing Camilla walk away with Trent and Ava, knowing she'd picked them over us years ago, and I'd been too blind to see it. But it also felt right, like a weight lifting off my chest. She'd made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. "She's gonna try something," Julian said between bites, wiping sauce off his chin. "You know she won't let this go easy." I nodded, because he was right. Camilla didn't give up. She'd fight dirty if she could. "Let her try," I said. "She's got nothing left to stand on." He smirked, a little proud, a little relieved, and we kept eating, the quiet settling around us like a blanket. I wasn't done with her yet, though, not completely. She walked away thinking she could still call the shots, but I had one more move. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to my lawyer's number, and sent a quick text. File for child support. Julian was 16, still a minor, and Camilla had a good job, better than good, with all those years of climbing the ladder. She'd barely paid a cent for him while I stayed home, covering everything. Now it was her turn. I kept it simple, just enough to reflect the effort she'd never put in, nothing crazy. She'd hate it, but she'd pay, because I'd make sure she had no choice. When she called the next day, screeching about it, I stayed cool. "You owe him," I said. "Years of nothing. This is fair." She tried to argue, claiming she couldn't afford it with Trent and Ava to take care of. That's when I brought up the adultery compensation clause, another little gem buried in the divorce papers she'd signed blind. "Pay it," I told her, "or I'll see you in court." She went quiet, then hung up. A week later, the first check came. She paid. She had to. I didn't want to crush her, not really. I just wanted what was right for Julie and for us. She'd chosen Trent and Ava, chosen her shiny new life over the one we'd built. Fine, but she didn't get to walk away clean, leaving us to pick up the pieces. I thought about Ava sometimes, that little girl caught in the middle. She wasn't mine, but she was innocent, and I hoped Camilla wouldn't drag her through too much mud. Trent, though, I didn't care about him. He'd hitched himself to her wagon, thinking it was a free ride. Now he was stuck, and I had a feeling he'd regret it soon enough. Julian finished his slice and leaned back, looking at me. "You think she'll be okay?" he asked, his voice soft. I knew he meant Camilla. I shrugged. "She's tough. She'll figure it out. But it's not our problem anymore." He nodded, accepting that, and we cleaned up the pizza box, moving on like it was any other night. I didn't feel victorious, not exactly. It was more like relief, like I'd finally closed a door that had been hanging open too long. Camilla had chosen this path years ago, when she started lying, when she built a family behind my back. I'd given her everything, my time, my trust, my silence, and she'd thrown it away. Now she was out there, scrambling to make it work with Trent, while I was here, keeping things steady for Julian. That's what mattered. The house was ours, the money was mine, and our life was ours to shape. She tried to take it all, but I'd held on, and now she had to live with the fallout. "You chose this," I told her, and I meant it. She did, and I was done feeling sorry about it. I woke up the next morning to sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, hitting the counter just right, making the old wood glow a little. The house was quiet, peaceful in a way it hadn't been for years, not since Camilla started drifting away, leaving me and Julian to fill the empty spaces she left behind. Last night had been a storm, with her storming in with Trent and Ava, trying to rip everything apart, only to walk out with nothing but her own mistakes. Now it was just us, me and Julian, and the air felt cleaner, like we'd finally shaken off something heavy. I started the coffee maker, the familiar gurgle filling the silence, and thought about what came next. She was gone, the divorce was final, and we had a chance to start over. Not from scratch, but from something real, something ours. Julian shuffled in a little while later, his hair a mess, still in his pajamas. He grabbed a mug and poured himself some coffee, even though I'd told him a million times he was too young for it. "Morning," he mumbled, sitting at the table across from me. I nodded back, taking a sip of my own. "Morning. Sleep okay?" He shrugged, the way he always did when he didn't want to talk too much, but then he said, "Yeah, better than I thought." I got that. After all the yelling, the revelations, the house, the book, the divorce being done, it was like we'd both been holding our breath, waiting for the dust to settle. Now it had, and we could breathe again. I looked at him, my kid who'd grown up too fast, and felt a pang of pride. He'd stood by me last night, quiet but strong, and I knew we'd be okay. Camilla and Trent were out there somewhere, probably licking their wounds. I'd heard from a mutual friend a few days later. They'd moved to some city a couple hours away, renting a cramped apartment because they couldn't afford much else. Trent lost his job not long after, something about his boss finding out he'd been messing around with a married woman, Camilla, and it didn't sit right with the company. I didn't feel bad for him. He'd walked into this with his eyes open, thinking he'd hit the jackpot with her. Now they were scrambling, borrowing money to cover the settlement and legal fees I'd forced her to pay. The child support checks started coming too, small but steady, and I put every cent into a savings account for Julian. She hated sending them. I could feel it in the stiff way she wrote his name on the envelopes, but she didn't have a choice. Her perfect little family fantasy was cracking, and I wasn't surprised. It was built on lies, and those don't hold up long. Me and Julian, though, we were moving forward. He'd been talking about college for a while, tossing around ideas about where he wanted to go, what he wanted to study. Maybe writing, he said one night over dinner, a few weeks after Camilla left. Like you. That hit me hard, in a good way. I'd never pushed him toward it, never even told him much about my own work until he found that book. But he'd been reading my stuff, MJ Clark's stuff, on the sly, and he liked it. "You're good at it," I told him, keeping it simple. "If that's what you want, go for it." He nodded, a small smile tugging at his mouth, and I could see him starting to figure himself out. He was applying to schools now, filling out forms late into the night, and I'd sit with him sometimes, helping with essays or just keeping him company. It felt right, like we were building something together. I kept writing too, under my pen name, staying out of the spotlight like always. The Silent Watcher was still doing well, the streaming deal was signed, and checks kept coming, but I didn't let it change us. We stayed in the house, fixed it up a little with the extra cash, but nothing flashy. I liked the quiet, the routine, coffee in the morning, writing in the afternoon, dinners with Julian where we'd talk about his day or just sit in comfortable silence. Some nights, he'd show me bits of his own stories, rough drafts he'd scribbled in notebooks, and I'd read them, amazed at how sharp he was, how much he saw. "You've got a knack," I'd say, and he'd shrug, but I could tell he was proud. We were finding our rhythm, a life that didn't need Camilla or her chaos to feel whole. I thought about her sometimes, wondered how she was holding up. She'd chosen Trent and Ava, walked away from us like we were nothing, and now she was paying for it, literally and figuratively. I didn't hate her, not anymore. I just didn't care. She'd made her move, and I'd made mine, and we were both living with the results. Julian didn't talk about her much, but I caught him staring at his phone once, like he was thinking about texting her. "You can, I said, keeping my voice light. "If you want to." He shook his head, putting the phone down. "Nah, she doesn't get it. We're good here." That was enough for me. He didn't need her approval, didn't need her to see him. He had me, and I had him, and that was more than she'd ever given us. The days turned into weeks, then months, and the house started feeling like ours again. Not hers, not theirs, just ours. I'd walk past the living room where she'd stood with those divorce papers, and it didn't sting anymore. It was just a room, a place where we'd faced her down and come out stronger. Julian kept writing, kept applying, and one day he got a letter, an acceptance to a school he'd been eyeing, with a scholarship for his essays. "Dad, look," he said, holding it up, his grin wide. I hugged him, hard, feeling like we'd hit a milestone we'd earned together. We were starting again, not because we had to, but because we wanted to for him, for me, for all of us who mattered. And it felt damn good. I was sitting at my desk one morning, the house quiet except for the hum of the coffee maker in the kitchen, when the phone rang. It was Camilla. Her name flashed on the screen, and for a second, I just stared at it, my thumb hovering over the button. Months had passed since she'd walked out with Trent and Ava, since I'd turned her plan upside down with the house deed, the book, and the divorce she'd signed without reading. We'd had no contact since the child support check started. Stiff little payments she sent like clockwork, probably gritting her teeth every time she wrote Julian's name. I didn't expect her to call, not now, not after everything. I picked up, curious more than anything, and her voice came through, softer than I remembered. "Hey," she said, like we were old friends catching up. "Ava's starting school soon. I was wondering if you had any advice. You were always good with that stuff." I didn't say anything at first, just let the words sit there, heavy and strange. Advice? After she'd tried to erase me, to take everything and leave me with nothing? I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window at the backyard where Julian used to kick a soccer ball around. Part of me wanted to hang up, to tell her she'd lost the right to ask me for anything. But I didn't. I just sat there, silent, letting her squirm on the other end. "Look," she said after a pause, her voice tighter now. "I know things ended bad. I just thought, for Ava. For Ava. Not for Julian, not for us, just for the kid she'd chosen over her own son." I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my tone flat. "Figure it out, Camilla," I said. "You've got Trent. You don't need me." She started to say something else, but I ended the call, setting the phone down with a soft click. That was it, done. I wasn't her crutch anymore. Julian came home later that day, tossing his backpack by the door like always. He'd been at school, finishing up his last year, and he'd grown into this quiet confidence I couldn't get enough of. "Mom called," I told him, keeping it casual as I stirred a pot of pasta on the stove. He raised an eyebrow, leaning against the counter. "Yeah? What did she want?" I shrugged. "Parenting advice. For Ava." He snorted, a short, sharp sound, and shook his head. "She's got nerve." I nodded, stirring the sauce. "Thought you might want to know." He didn't say much after that, just grabbed a soda from the fridge and sat at the table, but I could tell he was thinking about it. Camilla was a ghost now, popping up just enough to remind us she existed, but not enough to matter. A few days later, Julian came to me with an idea. "I want to send her something," he said, holding up a copy of my newest book, The Final Deduction. It had just come out under my pen name, M.J. Clark, and it was already climbing the charts, another quiet when I didn't flaunt. I looked at the cover, dark red with silver letters, and raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" He nodded, a small smirk tugging at his mouth. "Yeah, she needs to see it." I didn't argue, knew he had his reasons. He flipped it open, showed me the dedication I'd written months ago, to those who think silence is weakness. It never is. It was for him, for me, for everyone who'd ever been underestimated. He grabbed a pen, signed his name under mine from Julian, and mailed it off. I didn't ask what he was hoping for. Maybe closure, maybe a jab. Either way, it was his call. Camilla never called back after that. I figured she got the book, read the dedication, and realized we were done playing her games. She'd faded out of our lives, living her mess with Trent somewhere far off, while we kept moving forward. Julian graduated a few months later, walking across the stage in his cap and gown, grinning wide as I cheered from the stands. He'd gotten into that college he wanted, the one with the scholarship, and he was set to study writing, following my footsteps, but making his own path. I was proud, prouder than I could say, watching him shake the principal's hand, knowing we'd built this together. The crowd clapped, the sun shone, and for a minute, it felt like everything lined up just right. I kept writing too, churning out stories under my alias, staying out of the spotlight like always. The final deduction was a hit. People loved the twisty plot, the quiet hero who outsmarted everyone. I put a piece of us in there, a cheeky teen protagonist who saw too much, and a sharp-witted dad who played the long game. It wasn't our story, not exactly, but it was close enough. The checks kept coming, and I socked most of it away for Julian's tuition, for the house, for whatever came next. We didn't need much, just each other, this place, and the freedom to be ourselves. Some nights, we'd sit on the porch, him with a notebook, me with a beer, and we'd talk about his ideas or just listen to the crickets. It was simple, real, ours. Looking back, I could see it all, Camilla's betrayal, the fight, the way we came out stronger. She thought she could break us, thought my silence meant I was weak. She was wrong. It had been my strength, my way of holding on until the right moment. Now she was gone, and we were here, living a life she'd never understand. Julian was off to college soon, and I'd keep writing, keep building. The best stories, I learned, were the ones built on truth, the kind we'd lived through, the kind we'd earned. The final deduction was doing well, of course it was. It had to. It was us, in every word, and that was more than Camilla could ever take away.